You're listening to Cooper Talk.
Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you something, people. I'm very excited to have my guest today because she's not only a Tony winner, she's been in some iconic movies. She's been in some great TV shows. She's written for TV. She's directed for TV. And now she just came out with a novel, The Real True Hollywood Story of Jackie Gold. And my guest is Dinah Manoff. How you doing, Dinah?
I'm doing okay. I'm just sitting here in New York City looking at the beautiful blue sky out the window. Happy to be here.
Now, I want to talk about the book. And what's cool that you wrote that book is that a lot of people with a career like yours, you've had a very successful career, automatically write a memoir. Like, they sit there and they go, oh, we're going to... Now, did that ever come into your mind, or was this just you? How'd you get the idea for this book?
Oh, well, honestly, for me to write a memoir, everyone in my family would have to be dead first. So I can't do that. It's just, it's just not going to happen. But this book came to me, well, the seed of it came to me a long time ago. When I was doing Empty Nest, the series, that was, a time before, around, and you'd find your picture in the Inquirer or the Star, Entertainment Tonight. And one day, right after my son was born, someone from the Inquirer showed up at my front door to question his paternity. And because I was a new mother and the mother bear was in me, I screamed at him and chased him off my property. And this was around the time when Princess Diana had been killed in that tunnel by the paparazzi chasing her. And it just planted a seed in me about the paparazzi and lack of privacy. And so I started, playing around with that concept. And in the real true story of Real True Hollywood Story of Jackie Gold, and she's in Malibu Colony. Her dad is the head of a movie studio. And she tells her story from the hospital bed where she's lying in a coma, having jumped off a balcony to escape paparazzi. It's a funny book. I may not sound funny, but it's a funny book. And it goes responsible. And like that.
It's funny, you're freezing a little bit on me. Must be the internet. But so you sat there, so you decided to write this. Now you've written for TV before. Is that when you first started writing? You wrote a few episodes for Empty Nest. I mean, have you always wanted to write?
I've always written. Writing a novel was daunting, and it took me many, many years. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'll start them. Writing a novel was a lot different than writing for television or short stories or, even theater. I had a previously adapted a book my father wrote in the 40s into a play with a friend of mine. But writing this novel took me many years and many drafts. And a writer. I had graduated college. I am not educated. I was absent all the days they taught about grammar and punctuation. And so this was my training ground for long form writing. And I just kept going. And this story kind of unfolded as I worked on it.
Now, you mentioned they knocked on your door. And, and we've seen in the years, paparazzi was bad then, but now it's just blown up. I mean, as someone who's been in the public eye, how do you think you would have been able to handle all the BS that goes on now? Like, you can't do anything. Like, if you were sitting there eating something wrong and there was a dribble in your mouth, someone would take a picture and they post it and there'd be some BS headline going, oh, look at Dinah Manoff. She can't even put food in her mouth. I mean, what is, as someone who's been in the public eye, Does it disturb you what's going on now?
Well, I watched the Britney documentary, and it I was the actress. I was that girl. And I did a lot of acting out. I was, smoking, drinking, never thinking. And I feel very, very fortunate that there were no cell phones at the time when they could have absolutely eviscerated me. So, I got away with a lot then. Could I handle it now? No. I feel very, I live on a little island near Seattle. I'm very private. I'm, even coming out to promote the book is big for me, is me stepping outside of my comfort zone now. So, no, I think it's horrific what's happened.
Now, with the book, you said the book's taken you a while to write. You had this idea. When did you sit there and really just get in gear and say, I'm getting this done? And when you did that, were you disciplined for the fact that you would sit there every day and write?
Well, I really wrote this in fits and starts. I had 3 boys along the way, and they were very inconvenient for my writing. So I had to make a choice at a certain point. If I was going to raise these 3 children under the age of 6, and or lock myself away in a room, and I made a choice to put the writing aside and concentrate on them until they were at an age where they needed me less. And so in fits and starts, this novel came about. And, when I first sent it out, I sent it out to big publishers and agents, and I got a lot of, wonderful feedback and and then away for a while. And then I sent it out to independent publishers and, immediately got, great feedback and 2 offers. And so, listen, I would have loved to have put it away and never risked getting more rejection and never having to write another draft of it. But the fact was, I really felt like I had to tell this story. This story had to come out of me. It really is, for me, it's not my story, but it's the story that I think I observed in Hollywood. And I think it was very cathartic for me to get this story out of me.
Now, in the story, are there any characters that are based on real people that you know?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's real people that I know, but it's not kind of like I'm, hiding a real boyfriend behind a character. I don't do that, but certainly there are, situations and lines. And, I did grow up in Malibu, and Jackie grew up in Malibu, and there was this waitress at the Malibu coffee shop who married this really rich guy in the colony. And are you losing me? Says my internet is unstable. And so, there were impressions made on me along the way of my childhood and my adolescence. And for me, the least interesting part of writing was writing about the glamour of Hollywood, because honestly, it's boring. It's all, where am I going to get my nails done and my hair at the studio? So what I tried to do was to dig into, the places in my character and Jackie that came from places the readers would identify: insecurity and fear and, feeling not pretty enough and all the things I felt as an actress and that, I feel women, all of us have in common. And those were the areas that I explored.
Now, how many drafts did you do? Because people always say about the writing the drafts, and then you do your drafts and you do your own drafts. Then you go to an editor and they want to do drafts. How many drafts did you go? And at any time as you were doing them, were you getting frustrated?
No, I love rewriting. Getting a first draft out is torture. I mean, it's just and this is, I hate it, but rewriting for me is glorious, and writing with an editor is the best, because that's how I used to feel as an actor in rehearsal before you had to actually get on stage and be nervous. The collaboration, having someone tell me how to make it better, that for me is thrilling, because then I can just take the note and and dig in. I probably went through 5 drafts of this, 5 complete different drafts, yeah, from beginning to end, sure.
And now, when you finished it, was it just a sigh of relief, or were you sitting there thinking, well, you know what, I might want to tweak that? And they said, no, Dinah, it's done, it's done.
Exactly. That was exactly that. I actually said to my editor, do not send me this one more time. But if I see it again, I will find page. Do not send it back to me. And that's how I knew I was done.
Now, I want to talk about your acting, because you've had a very successful career, and you come from famous parents. What made you get into acting? Like, did your parents ever say, don't get into business, don't stay out of it, or what made you decide to become an actor?
Well, I'd love to tell you that it was my passion for theater, but the truth was I just wasn't good at anything else. And I was kind of a juvenile delinquent, and I, was a dropout and didn't make it through. I wasn't a class kid. I couldn't sit still in class. But I had been cueing my mother on scripts from the time I was 6 years old. I mean, I grew up basically in a production company. My stepfather's a producer. There was a writer. So this is what I knew. It was seriously in my blood. And so, when I was around 17 or 18, I just started auditioning. And at that point, I was barely trained. I just was going on raw energy and some talent. And I was lucky. And, along the way, I learned more and learned craft and, sometimes went to class. But I really started out, just flying by the seat of my pants.
Well, you said you were lucky and you were getting some early work. Did that make it harder for you to learn the craft? Because it's one of those things, well, I haven't really studied much, but I'm getting work. I mean, where was your mind frame with that?
Also something I explored because I felt like a fraud. I knew I had a mother who had been blacklisted for 10 years, taught acting at the Actors Studio for years, had struggled, had done Shakespeare and the classics and was, an Oscar winner. And here I'm coming along, off the beach, little Sandy from the beach and going to auditions and just winging it. And I'm getting work. And so I felt like a fraud. And Jackie in my novel also feels like a fraud. She has the sense that she hasn't proved herself. And it was really good for me to explore that in the book because it was something that, I hadn't really yet explored in my life.
How hard is that when you are exploring it? It's like also when people write, autobiographies, they really have to delve into their soul a lot. And sometimes that's not easy when you're sitting there and you're really looking inside yourself and writing it. When you were drawing the correlations between you and Jackie, was it hard for you to write, or was it something that it just flow out?
It mostly, I will say that the harder things to write in Jackie were the more superficial things. Writing from that place, touching from that deeper place is the easier place for me to write from. Interestingly, for me, it is not the easier place for me to act from. And so it feels like a relief to me to be able to express myself from such an open place, where when I was an actor, I was always a relaxed, open, available, deeper source in myself. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but when I write, I just disappear.
I want to talk to you. You know, your in your acting career. How did Grease come about? And you know, did you like? I mean, I'm 57. I watched that. Everyone I knew went to see that movie. You know, how did Grease come about? And you know, and did you know that it was just going to be? I mean, it's giant. I mean, you know, when you talk about iconic, it's an iconic film. I mean, just tell me, did you know what the part was going to be? Were you excited? Were you up for that part you got as Marty? Or tell me about the audition.
So originally, they brought me in for Frenchie, for D.B. Kahn's role. And I read for Joel Thurm, the casting director, and he looked at me and he said, "Why don't you come back and read for Marty?" And I was like, well, okay. And so I came in with, the adjustment I took was that Marty was emulating Marilyn Monroe, and that I was playing a character who was playing a character, right? So that she was always, you know, trying to find that Marilyn in her body. And the casting director, Joel Thurm, said, "Yes, that's it, but now more Fire and Ice." And Fire and Ice was a lipstick at that time in the 50s, and I knew exactly what he meant. And I actually happened to have an old lipstick of my great aunt's with me because I was working on that character. And so then I put the lipstick on, and that was it. Then I had to do a dance audition. Unfortunately, I'm not much of a dancer, but what I did was I figured Marty would just compensate with her shoulders and her hips and her lips. And so, you know, there were all these dancers flying around me in the audition because they were all auditioning too. Sorry for the phone ringing. And I just, you know, I just shimmied. Somehow I got the part.
Now, what was it like on the set? Because it's all a bunch of young actors. You know, it's a fresh idea. It's based on a play. I mean, was the set just a fun time?
Hold on, I'm going to answer that as soon as I unplug the remote. Okay. I heard the question. So, for me, it was my first movie, and I was nervous, really, really nervous, and intimidated by all the talent around me. John and Olivia. I mean, John was, at the time, he was sexier than you think he was. There was an energy around him that really, at least me, left me speechless. And so there was all this heat around John, and you would think that because there were so many of us young, terribly attractive people working together during the summer for 3 months, but there was very little action going on. You know, there was a lot of heat on the set and not a lot of, you know, nobody was like hooking up, as they say now. Except Jeff Conaway, who was getting all the action. So there's a little bit of dish for you. But we had a great time. I mean, the ladies and my favorite scene to film was Sandra Dee, because it really was like a slumber party all day long. I loved hanging out with Stockard and Dee Dee and Jamie, and torturing Olivia, who really was a good girl, like we were really the bad girls and she really was the good girl. So getting to just, have fun and tease her and torture her in character all day was kind of delicious and real. And she was such a good sport, about the whole thing. She's a darling. Anyway, yes, it was great.
So when it came out, did you guys know it was going to be a hit?
No. It was hyped up to be a hit, but when it came out, the reviews were really lukewarm. I mean, a lot of the criticism was that it was too campy and that, it wasn't as good as the play. And Grease kind of was like this rolling stone that kept gathering energy as the years went by. I mean, I get almost as much fan mail now as I did back when it opened up. It's every generation kind of rediscovers it, and its campiness works in its favor. So, it wasn't a big hit when it opened. It was big hype when it opened, but it became a big hit over the years.
Now, it's funny, we talk about Grease, and now, how did that not kickstart because you were new, how did that really get your career in gear? Once Grease happened, did you start getting a lot of offers?
I remember it as not being a career kickstarter. I remember it as just being, another job on the way to another job. I mean, I was never really very career conscious, to be truthful with you. I was always surprised that I was hired again. And after Grease, I think I did soap after Grease. I would have to look and see which came first.
It is soap.
No, I can't remember.
Soap was after, which I wanted to ask you about soap because that's one of the shows. And as I said, I was in high school when that was on, and it was just a funny show, and it was just the characters were crazy. I mean, what was that like on the set? Because there were just so many wacky characters, and I'm sure off camera they were very funny. It's like anything. If you're performing, you're funny. But how was that? Like, what was that like? Because you went from the movie set to a TV set again, but you have a recurring role. How did you acclimate to that?
Well, first of all, it was my favorite television show at the time. So the fact that I got cast on it felt like walking into the pages of a book I'd been reading. It was like when I first walked onto the set and I saw, Bert, Richard Mulligan's character, and, Katherine Hellman's character, and Billy Crystal's character, and I really I wanted to point and say, look who's over there! You can't even believe it. Jay Johnson with the puppets. I could not believe that I was getting to play with these people, and so for me, it was I think it was the most excited I had ever been about getting a role. I think maybe still to this day, it might be the most excited because they were breaking ground. It was edgy and it was controversial, and Billy Crystal was the first openly gay character, and they were talking about sex and adultery, and it was so juicy at the time. Now it's I mean, it's still fun to watch, but it's not edgy. So I was just so excited and happy to be there. And then Susan Harris, who is probably the greatest television writer who's ever lived, in terms of sitcom. I mean, her humor and the writing fit me so well. I felt for the first time like I could play, my Jewishness and my New Yorkishness and, all the parts that, and I go into this in the novel as well, parts of me that because I was Jewish, that I had to cover up in order to play generic roles on screen. And soap allowed me to be me, with all my stuff.
So you're in a TV show great show. You're in an iconic movie, and you end up on Broadway, and you win a Tony. It's so funny because earlier in the interview you said, when you were younger, you sort of felt like you were a fraud, and like the character in the book, but now you're on. How did Broadway come about? I mean, and for you who did, was just like, wait a second, you never took it real serious. I mean, how did that come up?
Yeah, good question. So, as I was telling you earlier, I was cueing my mother on scripts from the time I was 6. And a lot of the scripts I was cueing her on were Neil Simon. She did Prisoner Second Avenue. She did Plaza Suite. And so when I Ought to Be in Pictures came up, the rhythms were so familiar to me, and again, it accessed a part of me that was really natural to me. She was this kind of tough, young, New Yorkie, Jewish girl who had very complicated feelings and had been abandoned by her father. Well, that was me. It could have been written for me. And I felt from the very first audition that I was the one for this. And it was a great experience, being directed by Herb Ross. Herb Ross probably gave me the greatest education I'd had as an actor. Spending those months of rehearsal with him.
Was it hard for the fact that, Broadway it's a grueling schedule. You're doing shows and it's live. It's not like Grease. If you screw up a line, take 2, or the TV show. Oh, what was it like that first night on stage? I mean, did you have butterflies? Were you anxious, or was it that nervous energy?
It was thrilling and terrifying. But, what I learned because Ought to Be in Pictures was also my first play, what I learned was that I was far more comfortable on stage than I'd ever been in front of a camera. It was my medium. I felt free on stage in a way I hadn't felt before. I wasn't worried about how I looked, the lighting. I mean, I grew up with a mother who used to, grab my hand and take me from light to light on her sets and say, see, this is good lighting. This is bad lighting. I mean, she was in the makeup chair, half the day. So there I was on stage with distance and presence and really engaging in a story from beginning to end, not that got chopped up into little pieces. And I felt free.
Now, you win a Tony, for your first play. That's just something, that's like someone, a quarterback winning the Super Bowl in his rookie year. Or that's just something that's such a huge thing.
It was great.
What was the talk? Were you like the toast of the town? Because all of a sudden it's like, Dinah Manoff wins this. How did other actors act you? Were some a little bit bitter because you were this new person that got a Tony? Or, how did the acting community embrace you?
I felt completely embraced. I was young. So, yes, I was, in a sense, at that time, really being feted and really, got a lot of attention. That part was very uncomfortable for me. Because again, I almost didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to celebrate myself as much as I was being celebrated. I would say, I didn't have maybe the maturity or the confidence, but I sure had a good time. I could get a table at any restaurant in New York City, which was pretty cool.
Now, after that, you win the Tony. Do you want to stay on stage, or you want to go back to TV? What? And I'm sure your agents and managers may have said, "Well, you know what? You were just won a Tony. You could probably get this role." And as you were young. What was your direction you wanted to go in at that point?
Well, as I said before, I never really had that kind of career ambition kind of thing in me. I just went from job to job. I just wanted to work, quite honestly, and I really felt lucky just to work. But after a year of doing I Ought to Be in Pictures, I was exhausted because it's 8 shows a week, and it was an emotional show. So I knew I didn't want to keep doing that. And at the networks. And the great thing about development deals back in the day was that they'd pay you a whole lot of money to develop stuff. But you didn't actually have to go in and go to work. You just talk about it. Talk about potential work. And then they'd give you a lot of money to, so that you wouldn't go to any other network at the time. So I remember going from development deal to development deal during those years. And then I did the film of I Ought to Be in Pictures, which for me was not the enjoyable experience that doing the play was, and not the success that we all hoped it would be.
Why wasn't it enjoyable?
Something happens when you go from the atmosphere of stage in New York City to the pressure of big money on a soundstage in Hollywood. There's so much freaking money riding on your back to perform, to get the day done, to get the shots in. This is another thing I go into in Real True Hollywood Story of Jackie Gold. Everything is riding on getting the day shot because so much money is at stake. And I just got terrified. I was terrified that I wasn't going to cut it, that I wasn't pretty enough, that I wasn't, bringing the performance from the stage to the screen. And I don't think I did, because when I watched the movie, which I don't watch anymore, but when I've watched it, all I see is me shut down and in fear. I don't see any of that open place that I had on stage coming through where real moment-to-moment work was happening. For me, it's all survival. I'm in survival.
Now, a movie I want to also talk to you about, too, is Child's Play. Now, that's something that I believe you're the first person Chucky ever killed, which...
I am. I'm Chucky's first victim, and I'm really proud of it.
Which, that's so funny, because that's one of those things, again, when it came out, we're all like, I was in college, we're like, what's this doll? But we all watched it. And today, now, I put on the TV, and there's like a Chucky series, and it's still going. It's lasted for years. But did you also know that you would become, with horror fans, you're like a hero?
I get Chucky dolls in the mail to sign. I mean, it's the craziest thing. So when I auditioned for Chucky, I had auditioned for 2 movies. One was Bloodhounds of Broadway, starring Madonna, Jennifer Grey, Matt Dillon, Randy Quaid, all these stars, big stars at the time. And I auditioned for Child's Play. And I thought, well, Bloodhounds of Broadway I got, but it was paying me no money. But I thought, this is going to be the movie of the year. Everybody's going to see this movie. Child's Play was paying me lots of money. But I thought, horror film, nobody's going to see this. Well, of course, Child's Play was #1 at the box office. No one ever heard of Bloodhounds of Broadway again, straight to cable, or to whatever it was, video at the time. So, clearly I have no idea.
Well, what's amazing about your career also is that the character Carol Weston was in three different shows. How did Carol Weston come about? Was that just on the Golden Girls to start? Was that just something you were supposed to be on there once or twice, or how about?
What I do besides Golden Girls?
It was with Empty Nest. It was the same character.
Yeah, but you said 3
Nurses.
Oh, did I guest on Nurses? See, I never remember anything.
As 2 episodes as Carol Weston you had guested.
Oh, good for me. No, we were a spinoff of Golden Girls. Originally, they spun it off with Richard, and Rita Moreno was playing his wife originally in an episode. And then they decided, for whatever reason, to make him single. So they killed off the Rita Moreno character and brought in two daughters, Christy McNichol and myself. And that was the pilot episode. So yes, I did some crossovers to Golden Girls, but those were when we were already, in production on Empty Nest.
Now, Empty Nest was a huge hit, and once again, you get to work with Richard Mulligan, who's brilliant. I mean,
Susan Harris writing, so how happy was I?
Yeah, and what was that like when all of a sudden you're on a hit series, and now you have a place where you're going to go to work every day. It's not the development deals. You're going to go to work. People love the show. How does your life change? Because all of a sudden, I try to explain to people, back then when there was a hit show, there's only a few networks. So millions of people saw it. Like everyone. How did that change your life? I mean, you had success before, but now this is like every week, millions of people are seeing you.
Yeah, I think truly that was life-changing for me. And I think I was at a point in my life and my career where I could take it in and have fun with it. So, come here, you can say hi if you want. I'm saying I'm on a radio show. Okay, well then you're gonna have to leave us now.
Okay,
I love you, Mom.
Let me just dip in for a kiss.
I'll start over.
No, I know you said that was great. That was a great moment on my podcast.
So that was my mom, Lee Grant, in her pajamas, coming in to say good morning. Anyway, what were we talking about? Empty Nest. So yes, it was life-changing in that I knew as soon as the ratings came out and the reviews came out that we were going to be there a while. And to have security as an actor in Los Angeles, to know that I could just park my car somewhere with my name on the, parking place every day. Oh my God, it was such a relief to me. And doing sitcom for me was as close to stage as anything. So, we ran a little play all week long, and it was fun. And working with Christy and Richard and David was, amazing. I mean, we had the best time together. I was just watching, there's a whole blooper reel. It's like 2 hours long on YouTube that was sent to me that I'd never seen of Empty Nest. And all I could think was, we had the best time. We had so much fun working on that show.
Well, during that show, you also wrote a script and you also got in directing. Was that something you always wanted to do? I mean, how did you parlay into, well, that's writing now, you've written a book, but you wrote a TV, which is completely different. But how did you parlay it into directing? And what's that like when you have to direct yourself? I mean, I think that would be nerve-wracking.
I was so excited when they let me direct my first episode on Empty Nest. First of all, I am by nature a busybody. I am looking at what you're doing. I'm looking what you could do better. I'm looking over at the set. I'm looking at the costumes. It's just my nature. So when they let me direct and that part of me could be useful, it was like I felt for the first time like I could breathe. And, instead of trying to keep my mouth shut, I could say all the things that were in my brain and control everything on the set. It was so great for me. And I had to learn, it was great to learn how to work with 3 and 4 cameras at that time. Directing myself, they wrote me light for, I think I directed 6 episodes altogether. And each time they would write me very light in the episode. And then I would have cue cards because my attention was so split, it was hard for me to keep my lines in my head. So, they just made it easy on me. But I had a blast directing.
Well, then after that, after the show was done, you went and directed some other shows. Is that harder to get a job as a director? Because back then it's Hollywood. One, you're a woman. I mean, let's be honest. You know, it's a different time now, and
It's
two,
a different time now. And yes, back then there were almost no women directors, and boy, I came up against some personalities in the network and in the crews. I mean, I was not prepared for how hard it was going to be. And I was new. I was learning. And there was no, whereas an empty nest, I had a family protecting me and wanting me to succeed. When I went out onto the other stages, it was cutthroat. And it wasn't worth it to me to pursue, because I was coming home. I had a child at that point. I had my first son, Dashiell, and I was coming home wrecked and sobbing from trying to prove myself. And it wasn't worth it. It wasn't worth it.
See, even to me, what makes that even worse is you were a TV star. You've been in movies, and it wasn't worth it for you. And you think of how many people who didn't get that chance just because the doors were closed. And I mean, you think about it, you were on the forefront because a lot of people weren't doing it. I mean, do you ever talk to younger directors? Did they reach out to you because they know that you were doing TV?
Well, not so much that as, Melanie Mayron, who is a really close friend of mine for many, many years. Melanie has become an incredibly successful television director. And she directed the pilot of the very last series I did before I left Los Angeles, State of Grace. And first of all, Melanie knows camera. She knows lenses. She's always been a photographer. She's technically very savvy, which I wasn't. I was very good at staging and working with actors and comedy and timing. I was a perfect little sitcom take director. But Melanie also had the ability to not take criticism personally, and I didn't. Everything stuck to me. She can hear criticism not as a personal thing, but just apply it to what she has to do as a director. And so that's where I'm culpable in leaving that career, because I really wasn't cut out to be a television director. It's a producer's medium. It's not the director's medium. And I was not good at being a tool of the producer's wishes. I just wasn't. What made you write
An episode of Empty Nest? Was that just something on a bucket list? You said, I want to write some TV, because that's hard too, because you're writing for everybody.
We were, I don't know what, 5-6 years in at that point. It was like I kind of knew what to do and say around the kitchen table in the Weston's house. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm a pretty antsy, creative person, and I'm always looking for how to, express myself. And at a certain point I thought, well, I could probably do this. As it turned out, it was not very good. I wrote it with my best friend, Valerie Landsberg. We wrote it for ourselves. It was pretty terrible. And, oh my God, it was probably the worst week I ever spent. Empty Nest on the set. Nobody was very happy with me that week. And then I wrote the story for my mom to come on to play Aunt Susan, which was the other worst week I ever spent. Oh, big dreams.
Now, after State of Grace, you pretty much left the biz.
Yeah.
What was it? Just a personal thing? Were you just tired of it? Was it because you think about it. You've won a Tony. You've been in, as I said in the beginning, you've won a Tony. You've been in a great movies. You've been in a hit TV show. You've directed TV. You've written some TV. Did you just say, I've done enough? I just want to raise my kids, or I just want to get out of L.A. and New York? What made you decide to just leave?
Yes, all of that. Yes, and I'll tell you about the last audition I went in when I knew it was over. There was a role being cast, I think it was for 6 Feet Under. It was the role of a therapist. It was a fairly nice role, okay role. And I got dressed, I did the makeup, I did the hair, I learned the lines, I drove the hour to the studio, and I walked in, and there were 16 other actresses, all up for that part, in the room, all of whom I knew, all of whom were fabulous talents, and we were all there to beg for this role. And I said, nope. No more.
So do you miss it? Like you said, you moved up to an island, and was that your first move when you left town? Did you go to?
Yeah. Yes. I never miss being in show business. Never. I feel that the day I was done, I was really, really done. I did not want to spend my late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s auditioning for roles that didn't have substance to them anymore, fighting for those roles against other actresses who were equally as good or better than me. It just was, I liked myself too. And I had 3 little boys and a husband, and I loved being a mom, and I didn't want to be a working mom because I had a working mom, and I wanted to be right there. I did not want someone else raising my kids. And LA was a really hard place to raise 3 boys in. I wanted them to have room to play and to move and to explore. And so we looked around, and we ended up in the Northwest. And I have never looked back. It was the best decision I ever made.
Now, if the book, okay, so the book comes out. Now, if it gets optioned, or I don't know if it has, I'm not going to ask, but let's say it gets optioned or from movie rights, would you go back to LA for that, to be involved in the, because you know how Hollywood can change stuff around. Would you want to keep hands-on to the book if they said we want to make the book a movie or a series? And would you let it go, or is it your baby and you want to hold it tight?
I would let it go so fast, you wouldn't believe how fast I would let that slippery thing out of my hands. No, I feel like my work was done. I would be very flattered if I were asked to, have anything to do with it. But there are much better screenwriters than me to adapt any book, my book or any book. And I don't have the need to explore it further, and I don't have the need to control it. The book is the book. I think it's everyone I know who's read it has enjoyed it. That brings me great satisfaction. I love talking about it. I love that it finally found an audience, because the hardest thing as a writer is not having an audience. Is having all these things to say and nobody to say them to. So to finally have feedback and get to talk about the characters and the story and what brought it on, it has been glorious for me.
Now, is another book in your future, or are you saying one and done? Or is that going to be something that...
I hope so. I hope there is. Right now I'm pretty concentrated on getting Jackie, the audience that I think she deserves. And I have some other stuff I'm working on. Yeah, but nothing to talk about yet.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming on, and it's just, as I said, you've had such a great career, and the book, I know some of your co-stars gave good reviews on it, which must make you feel good.
Yeah, I got some stunning reviews, and Jamie Lee Curtis is prominently featured on the cover of the book, giving her wonderful blurb, and I feel very gratified that so many people are enjoying the book. The Real True Hollywood Story of Jackie Gold. You can buy it at Amazon or request it at your local bookstore. You can also go on my website, dinahmanoff.org. Back to you, Steve.
People, get the book. DinahManoff.org. Also, you're on Twitter. She's on Twitter. And
I am.
Yes. And so
And
go to
Instagram.
Twitter. Follow her on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. It's at Cooper Talk. Also, as you know, DianaManoff.org. Go to my website, CooperTalk.net. You can find over 880 episodes there. Email me, Cooper at CooperTalk.net. Instagram, I'm at CooperTalk1. And don't forget, go buy the book. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guests. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you guys next time.